things to not do when dividing with decimals. Wrong. Put a remainder next to a decimal formed answer. Never put a remainder. Instead, in your problem, you're going to put a 0 next to your answer. You can't put a remainder here because it's a decimal formed problem. So you add a 0, and then when you get 0 from this problem and there's no other numbers to bring down, you minus this 0 when you add a 0, and then you'll put a 0 up there, and then 0. So that's why you never put a remainder here, because you can always just add a 0 on to, you can always add a 0 to this number right here, and when you're doing that, make sure to put a 0 here, because you're technically minusing 0 from 0 and then getting 0 after that. And that stops you from getting a remainder, which would count the problem as wrong if you put a remainder. A way to remember how to divide is these 3 letters here, these couple letters. Divide is for D, multiply is for M, subtract is for S, check, which means like check that the number after, like the answer to your subtracting problem in the division problem is less than this number next to the problem right here. It always has to be less. And yes, you are allowed to subtract as many times as possible, but always try to subtract by the biggest numbers to make it easier. And then B stands for bring it on down. And an easy way to remember is, does McDonald's sell cheeseburgers? And what I do is I do divide, multiply, subtract, check, and then there's this song that I memorized from a saying, and this reminded me of it. It's like, bring it on down. That can help you remember the steps. So we're gonna look at 1 and 2 here. I'm gonna run through the steps of how you do these problems. So you don't want to do another problem like in the middle of the sheet. You want to get on a new piece of paper and make sure that you have a clean sheet of paper like this. Then, how you're going to set up your division problem is you're going to do 1 line up and 1 line to the side, like that. We are going to start by setting a decimal number, and you may think, wait, that's a decimal. How am I supposed to divide it? Well, you take this decimal and move it 1 time over here. And what you do on the outside, you always do through the inside. So we're gonna have 28, 284, and then we're gonna put a decimal point right here. And then we're gonna move it over. And now that we have it set up, we could put this decimal and move it up for our answer. And our answer numbers are going to be in the same spots as these numbers right here. First, you're gonna start off by saying how many times 4 goes in 2. Goes in 0 times. you could put a 0 there if you want, but some don't, but I do. Then you're going to do how many times does 4 go into 28, since it can't go into 2. You're going to count by 4s. And if you're not able to do that, you could just add 4 a bunch of times until you get either 28 lower than it, like 1 lower than it, or yeah. So an easy way to do times is putting 4 like that. Let's do times 5. 5 times 4. So we're going to count 5 4 times. 5, 10, 15, 20. We got 20. So that our answer would be 20. That doesn't seem enough for 28. We could still go 1 more. Or 2 more. So maybe we'll try 6. So let's do 4 times, oh, that was a wonky 4. 4 times 6. Well, let's try again. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. 6. So 4 times 6 is 24. I could still go 1 more. So maybe let's try 4 times 7. We're going to do 4 times 7. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 28. And that is exactly the same as the 28 on there. So when we minus that, we would get a 0. But you're going to put the 28 here, and then you're going to move your 7 up there, because that's how many times 4 goes into 28, 7 times. So you're going to put a 7 minus 28. 8 minus 8, 0. 2 minus 2, also 0. Then we have this 4 over here. He's looking kind of sad. He wants to be included in the problem too. So we're going to put this arrow to show that we bringed it down, so that way we don't forget. And then we're going to put them right here. Now, since we have 4, we could just do 4 times 1. And anything multiplied by 1 is the same thing. So 9 times 1, 9. 10 times 1, 10. And so on. So we're going to do 1. These are both zeros here. I know it kind of looks like a 2. Then we're going to minus, get a 0. And you never ever put remainder 0. Don't do that. Never. You're just going to have 7 and 1. Some people say 7.1, and some people say 7 and 1, and then they'll use like hundreds and tenths and stuff like that. But I just simply say 7.1. And then that would be our answer. And the things that are always, you always want to remember to do this line here. It keeps everything nice and organized. And if you have a problem with keeping your numbers organized, even when doing this, so we're going to do 284 like last time, but we're not going to actually do the problem. You could put lines in between to keep your numbers organized, so that way it doesn't get mixed up. Now we're going to see what things you can do to help you do the problem. We're going to run through wrong again. So never put a remainder next to a decimal formed answer. As I showed you, don't do that.